What is compression? This is going to be the last video you watch on this. I know you've been looking around for a while. Compression is going to be taking the loudest points of an audio signal and the quietest points of an audio signal, and it's going to compress them together. You've probably heard that definition before, but you haven't seen an example of where it's being used, but that is exactly what it is. Easy answer. We're going to go into Pro Tools real quick. We're going to take a look at this vocal line here. As you can see, we have a quiet part and we have a loud part. Very easy to understand, very easy to look at, and we're going to open up the stock compressor because that's probably what most of you guys got. We're going to take a look at this compressor. We have a little diagram here, and we have 6 knobs. We're going to take a look at these 2 knobs first. The threshold is going to be our probably most important one if we're just doing bare minimums. The threshold is basically the point of compression that we want to be going to. So it's going to be, if we're taking a loud part and a quiet part, it's going to be pushed to this point in a signal. The gain is going to be, because we're taking the loud part and we're pushing it to the quietest point, we need to bring the volume back up because now our loud point sounds just like our quiet point. Easy peasy lemon squeezy. Let's take a look at these vocals right here. You can see this little dot here is going to be where the vocal line is at so far. So that is going to be, that little dot that's moving around there is going to be what my audio signal's at on a graph looking point here. Excuse me, I'm rolling off the cuff. This has been like the couple times I've tried to take this. So now that we're going in here, we have an ideal kind of where our audio signal is going to be pushed into. What we want to do is we want to take the threshold and we want to put that line just a little bit below our quietest point in the vocal. So one more time, let's look at it. So this works out kind of nicely because that line is actually right in the middle there. So when we want to take our threshold mark, we want to put it right around where we think the quietest point is, and we want to put it just a little bit lower. Excuse me. Now, take the gain out, sorry. And we are going to put the compression in, unbypass it. And now the next thing we're going to look at, because what's going to happen now is that we've pushed our loudest points to the quietest points. So we're going to look at this input, and we're going to look at this output here. Now, the input should be way hotter because the output has now been pressed down to this point. Listen again. Take a look at these 2 things. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. So now we have our loud vocals at our quietest point. We need to bring this back up. We do a thing called regaining. So when you want to sound fancy to people, I got to compress it and then I got to regain it. You know, rack up those audio engineering bills that we like. So I'm going to take a guess at 5. Just ballpark it, right? Your feelings have grown cold, and I'll admit I'm getting what we're doing with this regain here is we're bringing this input here, or I'm sorry, this output back up to where the input was. So our volume comes back out to the same. So now listening to it together. Your feelings have grown cold. My quiet's good. And I'll admit I'm getting old. And now the loud is a bit more pleasant because it doesn't seem so much louder than the rest of it. Excellent. Now you know how to use a compressor for 90% of the work you're going to do. Let's say that it's just not quite doing what you want it to do. That's why we have knobs for compressors. Let's go one by one and talk about them. The knee is going to be, it's a funny word for, if you look at this point right here, it looks like a knee. That is why they call it the knee. It is just very simple to figure out. A lot of these things are not meant to be rocket science. They're meant to be easy to understand. So what a knee does is basically how the compression is going to be shaped when it hits the threshold point. And you can see as I move this up, looking at the graph here, my knee is now kind of smoothed out. So when the compression comes in, it actually comes in much softer than, you know, a breaking little angle for my knee point there. That's going to be kind of a situation. I would take maybe a little bit smoother of a entry point for compression for vocals or you know, instruments, maybe softer instruments, and I would probably put it harder on drums. And I think that's a general consensus for most people. Attack and release are kind of self-explanatory how quickly the compression comes in and how quickly the compression fades back to where it was before. So it's kind of attack is opening the gate, release is closing the gate. You can kind of open those up if you want the attack to come real quickly, so you never want that to reach a point past it, or maybe you want it to be a bit more natural, so you give the attack just a little bit less. And release is kind of the same way. A ratio is kind of what you'll see. You'll see this on a lot of different compressors, and it's probably one of the more important things besides threshold. It's probably the next step that you want to be looking at. A ratio is basically how much is getting compressed when it goes past the threshold point. So let's take an obvious example here. So if I put it at 1, I'm basically doing nothing to my signal. So when it comes up,
your feelings have grown cold.
All I've done is just regained it at this point. Now you can see as I start to turn this compression up, my audio signal starts to look more like it's being bent. You know, it's being bent at that knee point, and now we're putting ourselves into a position where we're actually being compressed. And if you want to go real heavy on it, you can just max out the compression. And now when it hits that threshold point, it just cuts, hits at that right flat point.
Your feelings have grown cold, and I'll admit I'm getting old.
Real big, real big. Your typical stuff, 3, just keep it at stock for now. But when we start getting into these sort of knobs, for you, the beginning audio engineer, you want to start experimenting with these when your compression doesn't sound like you want it to. And that's going to be the main thing when you work with all these kind of dynamic plugins and effects processors, is that keep stock, you know. And I like to use presets just to see. A lot of these are labeled and stuff like that. And when I first started out, I would use these to get an example on why. Well, you know, what do people expect out of the other things? So you take a look at this. So when it comes in, you're looking at, look, barely anything's done to this, and the knee is high, the attack is in. So that's what they would expect a natural compressor to be on an acoustic guitar was. So you start to get yourself in a ballpark. And then, of course, from there, as an engineer, your ideal is to start moving it to where you think it should be. Use your ear, use your best judgment, play around. I mean, this is the joy of audio engineering, is that we get control of everything. Definitely use your ear. Go from headphones, go to monitors, do all that kind of stuff. That's compression. If you like this video, there will be more in the future. Be sure to subscribe, leave a comment, ask your questions. Let's get this all taken care of. Let's get this going on. Thank you.